Pundit is the football trivia game. Every sale using the code LIONS at checkout now gives a whopping 40% discount, plus a £10 donation to the Lions Food Hub. Visit punditgames.co.uk to order your copy. punditgames.co.uk, code LIONS.
You're listening to Achtung Millwall, broadcasting from the beautiful South Birmingham. Accept no substitute.
Hello dear listeners, welcome to Nick and Neil's Millwall History Hour, or hour-ish, depending on how long Neil and I can waffle on for. Joining me to discuss games from the past and matters and, the highways and byways of Millwall history is the man himself, Neil Fissler. How are you doing, Neil?
Hello, Nick. Good morning, everybody. Usual Friday morning, nothing to talk about as we played midweek. So we thought we'd waffle on about history.
That's a good idea. What more can you want from this life than to talk some Millwall history, dear listeners? We do play Huddersfield tomorrow, so we're slightly blagging this edition. I'm going to be really upfront with you, listeners. We've slightly put this part together at the bit of a last moment. So anyway, tomorrow's game, well, a critical game actually. We're playing Huddersfield Town at home tomorrow, third game in a week, crucial week, be ahead of the international break. But we thought we'd cast around for a result from the past, Neil, that we would like to see reflected again tomorrow. And we've found one, or you've found one, I should say. Credit where credit's due. A game played in 1969, mate. A nice 5-1 win over Huddersfield Town at Coldblow Lane.
Exactly what we need tomorrow. They're on their downers. They're near the bottom of the table. They've got a transfer embargo. Not that it really matters. It's one of those futile EFL gestures, isn't it?
Gestures.
Because they didn't put their accounts in on time. So we're due to really spank someone, aren't we? And this is a game at home. Hopefully there's going to be a decent-sized crowd there. By all accounts, everybody apart from Callum Styles is training again. So it's got all the makings, hasn't it, of a Millwall defeat?
It should do. It should do, shouldn't it? This result would be fantastic, reflected again tomorrow. It's a 5-1 win, as we've said already. Played at Coldblow Lane in front of 13,613 at the old Den. Some wonderful names on this list here, Neil. Goal scorers. In fact, it's a complete Millwall lineup because we've got an own goal in the mix there for the one goal for Huddersfield. It started off badly for us, Neil. An own goal, rare own goal for Barry Kitchener on 8 minutes. He was an accomplished defender. I don't remember seeing too many own goals by Kitch, but this one was before my time, listener, so I didn't see this one. But an own goal for Kitch on 8 minutes. And then there was a goal torrent, wasn't there?
Yeah, we stuck out a left leg, apparently, to intercept a Nicholson cross, but only succeeded in ramming the ball yards wide of the dismayed goalkeeper. It's down as Mike King in the Sunday Mirror. They obviously mean Brian. Many apologies, Brian, if you are listening, for the incompetent reporting that actually called you Mike.
1-0 down there. Then there's a goal torrent really near after that, isn't there? I mean, we weren't behind for long. 2 minutes later, Billy Neal, player that I want to touch on before we move along today's show. Billy Neal equalised on 10 minutes. Derek Posse, fantastic striker. He was our club record goal scorer for many, many years, Derek Posse. Very, very short, squat finisher, wasn't he, Derek Posse? He was a great striker for the club. 2-1 on 11 minutes.
This would have been one of his early displays, actually, Nick. I think he'd only just been signed from Tottenham. He's certainly
Spurs player, wasn't he? Yeah.
£25,000. Yeah, but I wonder if a better £25,000 has been spent on a player. Anyway, I digress.
We digress. Probably not. He was a fantastic signing and an absolutely ruthless finisher. I think he probably would feel, and he moved on. I started going 72, as I've said a few times, but he left us for Palace, I think the season after that I'd started going. So I caught the last few games of Derek Possey's career, and then he moved to Palace, but never really took hold there at Crystal Palace. And I think he was looking to try and get back into the top flight with them, but that never happened. So, yeah, 2-1 on 11 minutes. A Keith Weller, 37th minute penalty. If you used to ask me, Neil, one player I wished I'd seen in a Millwall shirt, it would have been Keith Weller, because everyone speaks so highly of him as a midfield maestro. And I think he was another player that came to us from, was it Chelsea he'd signed from? Or he came to us from Chelsea. He moved on to Leicester before my time, but a masterful midfielder. So 37th minute for Keith Weller, penalty. And then another goal for Derek Possey. So with Kitchener's own goal, it's 4-1 at half time. That's quite a dramatic first half of football, isn't it? 4-1.
Yeah, well, apparently the best goal of the lot, according to the match report. It's got them 4 minutes before the break. Possey pants to fire the best goal of the game. He raced between two defenders to snatch a 40-yard pass from Ken Jones. It's a blast from the past. And
Ken Jones,
coolly stroked the ball past the advancing Terry Paul.
He was his goal against Birmingham in the almost promotion season was a contender for goal of the season. It was again similar kind of move. I think it was a fairly direct side. Millwall were structured by Benny Fenton in a fairly what we'd now call a fairly direct style, and that was a ball down the middle, slammed past the Birmingham goalkeeper with some aplomb. So clearly a finisher of some finesse, Derek Possey, and as I said already, up until Teddy Sheringham, I think, was our club record goal scorer. It would finish a goal in the second half, a lone goal in the second, much less excitement in that second period. A rare goal for Eamon Dunphy. He didn't score many, did he? Dunphy. He was more of a creator than a scorer. But 67th minute, a goal for Eamon Dunphy.
Yeah, described as a 20-yard banana shot, which means...
You don't get banana shots anymore in football.
Yeah, no, he called it in other words, didn't he? A banana shot. I love that. Yeah, but that's one of those expressions in football reporting. I think we have to bring back a banana
shot. Yeah, I'm trying to do my best with daisy cutter. I don't think that entirely went away, but banana shots. You're right. Pele was renowned, or the Brazilians were renowned for banana shots around the wall. Of you could hit the football and curl it. I think the modern ball probably lends itself to moving in the air anyway. It's much lighter now than these old balls. So to curl an old school football like that implied real technique, power, and control. Which I think Dunphy did have in fairness to him. Again, another player that I saw at the very end of his career in a Millwall shirt. This was a win that would put us in third position. We were doing well this season. It would fall away somewhat though, Neil, not third, fourth. We'd finish in 10th spot. This is a classic Millwall series of defeats at the end of the season when the promise of promotion started to veer into sight. So we don't want that part. We wouldn't mind the 5-1 win, but we don't want the tailing off of form that's bedeviled us a few times over our history. So we went from third in February to finish in April 19th, last game of the season. We finished in 10th position.
Yeah, well, Fenton said it was our best win of the season, said jubilant manager Benny Fenton, according to the Sunday People.
Right.
And Possey said when Dunphy clipped a free kick on from a corner of the edge of the penalty area to Possey near the left-hand corner flag. And Billy Neal raced onto a first-time lob past Paul. He said they were scrambling to get back. We were going forward. The ideal setup, said Possey. A bit of a pointless quote there, really. But no,
wow, you've got to say something at the end of the game, haven't you?
Yeah, I wonder what Mike thought of it.
Millwall team that day, listeners, is some classic names, almost a side that would write itself. I mean, that was one of the things that's always struck me about this late 60s, early 70s period, that the team really didn't change very much, one or two names, but the spine of this team would be the one that would take us so close. Brian King, or Mike King, as we might name him now, Brian King in goal, Dennis Burnett, Harry Cripps, George Jacks, Barry Kitchener, Ken Jones, Derek Possey, Eamon Dunphy, Keith Weller, Gordon Bolland and Billy Neal. No substitute used that game. So There we are. Now, the name of Billy Neil, Neil, has been around the club for a long, long time. And I don't think, and listeners can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we've mentioned him terribly often. I thought it might just be nice just to mention him in passing, because there's a catchphrase or cliche in football of being a club servant. I don't think many that term is ever better applied than with Billy Neil, because he was with us both as a player and a member of staff for years, wasn't he?
Stalwart, I think, is a better name or tag. He's club stalwart. Joined us what?
Club stalwart.
Joined us in what, 60?
64. I'm just looking at the Who's Who book, which I recommend you buy, listeners. I recommend you buy it. It's a fantastic. If you're doing a podcast, then you can't beat it because it's instant knowledge. And this is how I sound so intelligent when I hope I sound intelligent. Anyway, William War Neil, Billy, of course, as he's known, outside left, joined us in 1964. Neil finished as a player in 1971, 212 games for the Lions, 30 goals over that period. Born in Scotland, Rosslyn in Scotland, 1944. He'd played for Hibernian, Bonnyrigg Rose. That's a fantastic named football club, Bonnyrigg Rose, and then joined Millwall. Made his debut versus Lincoln City. He was a tricky winger, as it's described. He flourished under Billy Gray, was an integral part of the team. Went 59 games unbeaten, so was a stalwart of that classic side unbeaten run in the mid-60s. And also, I suppose, was less remembered in a way, Neil, as the points made in the book, the back-to-back promotions, because we went from the 4th division through the 3rd up to the 2nd division with this, that very same side, didn't we?
Yeah, that was, funnily enough, we're going to do a history podcast, another one next week, when we're going to...
Next week, that's right.
Well, we were aiming to do it this week, but life...
Well, we've thrown this together slightly because we've got one or two odds and ends, and we've doing this Huddersfield review. But we'll come back with another one next week.
But when we got relegated to the 4th division, there's a little bit of shenanigans and skullduggery going on, which I will reveal next week.
There we are. I look forward to that. So yeah, back-to-back promotions with Billy and under the Billy Gray and Benny Fenton. And of course, upon retirement in 1973, he actually retired. He spent 3 weeks working in the offices of the Ministry of Defence. Clearly didn't like it. And then he came back to Millwall as a coach before moving into the commercial department for many, many years. And he was, I remember this through the 70s. There was always the name quoted in the programme that you went to go and for the office. You went to go and see Billy Neil working in the office. I don't know how long he worked for the club. It seemed to be forever. I think he's still obviously a guest of the club from time to time. A real servant.
Yeah, we only gave up about 6-7 years ago, I think. Yeah. He worked into his late 60s, 70s. For those people that used to go and buy the programmes from the old little shop that
up the steps,
or even at the new ground, the program office that was next to the ticket office. If you ever came across a Scotsman in there, that was Billy Neil.
Hats off to Billy Neil. I'm glad that we've had the chance. So often on these shows, Neil, it's one of the nicest things is to be able to mention the names of players from the past that don't get the spotlight. We've done it a few times, and it's nice. Billy Neil's quite well known, but it's nice to be able to mention his name because he was a huge club servant, both as a player and then a member of staff. So hats off to Billy Neil.
Achtung, Millwall.
Now, this is a bit of a hodgepodge of a programme, listeners, and I make no apologies to it. We're trying to do a few things together and for your entertainment this Friday morning. So next up, Neil, I've got some notes that I put together for last week for the trip to Reading. And I can put it politely, we couldn't be asked to do it, could we? So I thought we'd save it till this week. So this is a bit of it's a bit like bubble and squeak, listeners. You have it the next day and you say, it's nicer the next day. Well, this is what we're doing now, this 1983 trip to Elm Park, Reading.
Ran out of time last week. I think that we ended up waffling on about something totally unimportant when there was history to be discussed. And then
Gianni Infantino or something like that. We were
wasn't it?
talking about,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think the clock ran out on us, so we thought we'd carry it over. So apologies. This was intended as a tasty tidbit before the trip to the Majeski last week, but I've dug out this result. It's Millwall, Reading 3, Millwall 3, played in the third division on the 30th of April 1983 in front of just 4,410 at Reading's old ground, which was nearer to the town centre, a place called Elm Park, which is an old school terraced football stadium. But I went there a couple of times actually. I don't think I was at this game. This was part of a remarkable escape from relegation, almost death-defying escape to relegation to Division 4 under arguably one of our best ever managers, really, George Graham. An unlikely figure in a way, because he was quite a cultured Arsenal forward as a player, and a man. He always seemed to have this kind of air of I don't know about sophistication about him, but he seemed to be slightly aloof from such a rough and ready club as Millwall. But it was a winning combination because I think he actually saved us in terms of existence. If we'd have got relegated to the fourth division at this time, the club was deep in the mire financially. I don't know whether we would have survived that period. Ifs and buts maybe, but this was a remarkable draw. Reading 3, Millwall 3. Because we were down to 9 men at one stage. We had 2 men sent off. Dean Neil and Ian Stewart. Both saw, Dean Neil saw 2 yellow cards. Stewart saw a red. But we also staged a remarkable comeback from 3-0 down and staring the fourth division full in the face. We managed to come back and turn it to a 3-3 draw. So we've got goals for Reading. 1-0, 15 minutes, a player called
Pat Earls.
17 minutes. Pat Earls. 17 minutes, we've gone 2-0 down. Price scored for Reading. Do know the third one, 34 minutes, 3-0. Kerry Dixon, a man that would later come back and play for the Lions via Chelsea, of course. Kerry Dixon made it 3-0, and we were reeling at this stage. Then it's gone 3-1. Dean White's pulled a goal back on the 42nd minute, so we've got in 3-1 down at half time. Kevin Bremner's made it 3-2 on 62 minutes, and then a Dean White penalty to make it 3-3 on 67. As I say, this was part of a remarkable escape from relegation. The team for this remarkable turnaround was Peter Wells in goal, Steve Lovell, Dean White, Mickey Nutton, David Stride across the back line, Kevin Bremner, Nicky Chatterton, Anton Chulikovsky and Lauren Madden across the midfield. Up front, Dean Neal and Ian Stewart, both of whom would see a red card one way and the other. I've got a report here, Neil, from this would be the Reading local paper. I think it's called Reading Evening News, I think. So Reading 3, Millwall 3. In modern day lingo, there's woeful is the headline, woeful from the Reading point of view. In modern day lingo, Reading bottled this game. After 40 minutes of this electric charged third division relegation fight at Elm Park, the Royals were coasting to victory. They were 3-0 in front, and Millwall's Northern Ireland international Ian Stewart just been dismissed for kicking Steve Richardson. Must have been some kick to get a straight red back then. The result was not a foregone conclusion, though. Not even Liverpool could recover against... the result was a foregone conclusion, they were saying. Not even Liverpool could recover against such overwhelming odds. And yet the Royals somehow managed to blow it. Their all too familiar self-destruction tendencies once again proving their downfall. 10-man Millwall battered their way back to 3-3 with a fierce and often crude mixture of intimidation and sheer blood and guts. Now, if that's not a Millwall summary of the classic Millwall side, listeners, I don't know what it is. A fierce and often crude mixture of intimidation and sheer blood and guts. Much of it, Neil, was unsightly and stretched the rule book to its limits, but how effective it was. And even when they lost Dean Neal after 83 minutes, sent off for allegedly swearing at a linesman, they still nearly managed to snatch victory in the dying seconds. The Royals, in marked contrast, fiddled and fumbled their way around, barely able to cope with the physical and never say die attitude of their opponents. What wonderful, wonderful reading that makes. a little bit of trouble, a little bit of trouble in and around the ground. 14 arrests on the day. There had been a protest march by Reading fans because, interestingly, at this time, Reading was in the sights of one Robert Maxwell, famous figure from the 80s, publisher.
That's what we wanted to merge, wasn't it, with Oxford to form Thames Valley Royals?
Precisely. So the front page of the Reading Evening Post, that's the name of the paper here, soccer merger is still on after a weekend of drama. So not only are they losing 3-goal leads against Millwall in a relegation fight, not only are there scuffles in and around the stadium, on the terraces, there's also talk of the soccer merger between Oxford United and Reading still being on the cards. This is Oxford chairman at the time, Robert Maxwell, with his plans to form a new club based around, I imagine it'd be more Reading than Oxford, but the Thames Valley Royals were going to be the name of this merged club. The fans were marching from the town centre to Elm Park to protest against it. A move that would never come to pass, I think, probably thankfully.
Quite ironic. We actually lost to Oxford the week before. Actually 3 days before we played Reading. I've just seen here we lost 1-0 at Oxford. So you can imagine that Fat Max was probably willing.
I mean, it's a remarkable season from the Millwall perspective. When you look at this, Cameron, we have done during lockdown. I think that we did a show on this 82-83 season. I think it was Graham named it as his favourite ever season. Because what's remarkable when you look at the Millwall History website, which I do recommend you do, listeners, the millwallhistory.org.uk site is a fantastic repository of knowledge and records. But when you look at the side that started the season, it's totally different to the side that starts to come together as the last 5 to 10 games of the season. Is almost a total jettisoning of the old squad that got themselves into this pickle. And then George Graham finding players from who knows where he found some of these players, and he pulled them together into a mix that somehow would be prepared to stand their ground and, as the Evening Post has put it, use every means available to them to blood, guts, and intimidation or whatever it took, and some skill. No, let's not forget that, to pull themselves out of relegation trouble. Remarkable game, and I thought it was just too good a result and too good an account to let it pass without at least throwing it into this week's show. So there we are, 1983.
Penalty at Chesterfield that secured our safety, wasn't it?
1-0 win.
I can remember somebody.
Yeah, Cusack with a 66-minute penalty on the last day of the season. We'd beaten Brentford the week before, which there is footage of that on YouTube, Neil. I think Danny Baker did a what was that evening show he used to do? Anyway, he used to go down to Millwall, I think, as part of their kind of.
And Thames at 6 o'clock.
Yeah, and he used to kind of create these little videos where we were cast as kind of interesting idiots almost down there, And Chesterfield was the last win of the season, a 1-0 win, and that would take us clear finally of the relegation zone, and an amazing, miraculous act of survival under George Graham. And for that, I mean, he'd also win his promotion the following campaign, I think, 2 years later, rather, 84-85. I think he's a candidate for one of our greatest managers, if just for that act alone, because I certainly think we would have struggled to survive in the 4th division of those times.
So that a few years ago, somebody bought Dave Cusack's shirt from that Chesterfield game.
Right.
It was a shirt from memory, and they said, "Could you get it signed?" So I actually met Dave Cusack at Harlow Station. And he was working on a house.
Right.
And he actually signed the shirt.
That's fantastic.
Just interesting. Nothing that I Cusack shirt from that game for a little while. Red shirt with a roaring lion on the
Brilliant.
on the back.
Long ago days now. It seems such a long time ago. In some ways, I think one of the effects of age, listeners, is that some things like this can seem both a long while ago and just like yesterday as well at the same time. It's quite an odd thing. But this was a difficult time in Lions history.
I think what's for season, Nick, is that we actually won a trophy. We won the Football League trophy, and we won days before that Reading game. It was a 3-2 win at Oxford. At Lincoln. Dean Neal scored 2, and Alan McCleary, very, very early Alan McCleary.
Football League trophy was the kind of precursor to what would become the likes of the Autumn Windscreen, those Caribou.
Yeah.
What's the one for the third division? The Uncle, the pizza thing now. Anyway, it's that third and fourth division.
Yeah, the paint pot trophy.
Papa John's trophy.
Yeah, whatever you want to call it, whatever derogatory names.
The Pizza Cup. But a remarkable season. One of the greatest escapes, I think, in Millwall history. And just as an aside, just looking at the team stats for the season, there's Sam Allardyce at the top of the. Didn't have started his name starting with A. Sam Allardyce, 36 appearances. I think it's easy to forget he played for us. Sam Allardyce. And a young Teddy Sheringham even featured as a non-playing substitute that season. How about that?
Yeah.
There we are.
Yeah, whatever you do, Nick, if you ever see John Sitton, do not mention Sam Allardyce playing for Millwall to him. Otherwise, he will bed your ear for about 10 minutes on the subject. I should know on a podcast.
I won't shout out to John out there in that case. Millwall would finish 17th in the league table, actually quite some spaces clear, about 5 points clear of Reading, who would be relegated. We'll go down in the fourth relegation spot on 38 points. We'd finish in 17th on 43 points. So an amazing escape from the precipice, shall we say.
Achtung, Millwall.
Now, I've also dug out, I don't know why I've dug this out. I think I was anticipating West Bromwich Albion on April Fool's Day this year, isn't it? We've got an away trip to West Brom. Anyway, this is random now, listeners. I'm losing the plot now. I've dug out a result from 1947, more because of another game that took place on the same day, Neil. This is another escape from relegation, as it turns out. 1946-47 season. We went to West Bromwich Albion on the 10th of May that year and won 4-2. Quite a good win for the Lions at the Hawthorns in front of 11,381. I've got a report from the Birmingham Mercury listeners for you. Nothing went right for the Albion, Neil says. There were rarely any half measures in the play of Albion. They were either very good or very poor. In their 4-2 beating by Millwall at the Hawthorns, their display came within the latter category. Jinks, that would be Jimmy Jinks, scored for the visitors on 20 minutes. Elliott replying 5 minutes later, so 1-1. But shortly before the interview, Gripton unfortunately put through his own goal, so 2-1 at half time. Woodward got a third for Millwall at the opening of the second half. There's 3-1. Only for Clark to reduce the margin 2 minutes later, so 3-2 now. But by 61 minutes, the issue was settled by Brown, 4-2 for Millwall. Millwall were by no means a great side, Neil, but at no time did Albion play like a team. Their form was really too bad to be true, and anything in the nature of methodical work was conspicuous by its absence. A number of police officers moved in at one point. There was a protest and some bottles were thrown on the pitch from the West Bromwich Albion sections, listeners. This was a protest against the board. I think this was seen as it'd been a poor season for West Brom, and I think probably that lack of consistency had angered one or two of the Albion fans, and there was a little bit of scuffling, and coppers had to go in to sort it out. So there we are. That would finish Millwall's season, and we would survive. I think we would actually be relegated the following season, so post-war football, but we would survive that particular season in Division 2.
Yeah, with Jock Purdy. Yeah, well, I'll read them because I've actually got the first names, if you like. Tom Boy, Len Tyler, George Bradley, Fred Ford, Bob Kelly, Johnny Johnson, Vivian Woodward, who actually, his son is actually a Hollywood stuntman, believe it or not.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay.
Because I needed to find his death, so I traced his son. His son works in the film industry as a stuntman, or he did a few,
Wow.
4 or 5 years ago. Jimmy Jinks, Tommy Brown, and Harry Osman, who I think ended up, he discovered Payne, Terry Payne, the Southampton legend, when he was scouting. He ran a pub in Winchester before moving to America towards the end of his life. But, he discovered Terry Payne.
But a game that really caught my eye, Neil, was not actually a Millwall match. This was, I've got a front page here of the Coventry Evening Telegraph, and it's got a great account of a Great Britain versus rest of Europe match played on this weekend, May the 10th, 1947. So post-war football, an exhibition game. A Great Britain side trouncing the rest of Europe, as it's put here, 6-1. Wilf Mannion shining before 134,000 people packed into Hampden Park. That's not the record crowd, of course, at Hampden, is it? That was 149,000, I think, the record attendance for
something like
in the old Hampden, which is an incredible. I mean, 134,000 is more than good enough. So yeah, no, my I was caught by this post-war exhibition. It was like a Great Britain versus rest of Europe fixture. The two teams, which I thought probably warrant reading out. You've got Swift. I think that'll be Frank Swift, Neil, in goal for Great Britain.
That's right.
Hardwick for England,
George Hardwick.
who's captain.
George Hardwick.
Hughes of Wales. Macaulay of Scotland. Vernon of Ireland. Burgess of Wales. Matthews, who we'll come back to. Stanley Matthews, of course, of England. Wilf Mannion
of Tottenham.
Yeah. Tommy Lawton. Steele of Scotland, and I think it's Billy Liddell of Scotland. I don't know any of the foreign players, but we'll read them.
Yeah, what's the
Rest of Europe?
Yeah, what's the Millwall connection with that Great Britain thing?
Well, the Millwall connection is a story with
No.
Stanley Matthews.
No.
Oh, another one.
Pay attention. Pay attention. What
in the school was?
Yeah, what is the connection with that Great Britain thing?
Well, the one I was going to link on with was Matthews, but we'll come back to that. Did we not try and sign? Did we not try and sign Tommy Lawton with at this period? I'm sure we've mentioned an attempt to sign Tommy Lawton, one of the big names of the game at the time, by Charlie Hewitt.
In World War II, yeah. No, I'll give you half a. Yeah, you get half a point for that. Yeah, but he guessed it for us.
Only half.
Games as a gap in World War II.
I was going to read the rest of Europe, but they're not names I think that many of us will know. There was
Dorisi. Yeah, no, read them out.
Dorisi.
If we can find a
Dorisi of France. I think it's Dorisi. The print is quite fuzzed. Dorisi of France, Peterson of Denmark, Stefan of Switzerland, Carey of Era, Johnny Carey, I think his name is, Manchester United.
Right, Man United.
So Era there being what we would now call the Republic of Ireland. Captain was Parola of Italy, Ludl of Czechoslovakia, as they put it here. Lambrechts, I think, of Belgium. Gren of Sweden, Nordahl of Sweden, Wilkes of Holland, and Prest of Denmark. And referee was one G. Reader of England.
George Reed. Yeah.
And there was this novel thing called Substitutions. Apparently, they were part of the pre-match presentation, so that was quite a novel trip into the modern world. Goal scorers: Lawton for Great Britain, 2, Steele and Parola own goal, with Nordahl of Sweden netting for the rest of Europe, who were overwhelmed in the first half. The Great Britain side scored 3 goals in 4 minutes after the opening phase. So there we are, 134,000 at Hampden Park, which is an
I think
incredible crowd.
I think that game was probably part of a attempt to rebuild FIFA after World War II.
Right.
I think FIFA are on their backside. Yeah, they weren't the all-encompassing money-making machine.
TV-driven monster. No.
Yeah, so we played a huge part in rebuilding FIFA, and not that they've ever given us any credit for it, I don't think. But,
Well, we would play in the our first World Cup would be in 1950, England being in this case, this is a Great Britain side. But I think we would take part in a World Cup in 1950, which would have mixed outcomes, shall we say? But yeah, so this was a wonderful fixture. Have you ever been to Hampden Park, Neil? I went there when it was being rebuilt, and I wanted to visit. We were on a weekend in Glasgow, and when I went there, I wanted to visit there. I went to see Queen's Park play there, but half the stadium was missing. They were rebuilding at the time, so it's quite a strange kind of almost half moon effect of the stadium. Still a big place, all seated at the time, but half of the ground was missing, and it was the most miserable, cold afternoon. The football was Queen's Park versus, I think it was Cowden Beef, because of course Queen's Park famously played at the ground, and it was played through this kind of slight cold damp mist in the air, and all the most entertaining part of the game was a bloke on the far side, because you could see right through to the estate on the other side of where Hampden Park is located. And this bloke was doing figures of 8 in his car in a big car park over there, and that was the most entertaining part of the game. I think it finished 0-0. But at least I can say I've been to Hampden Park. That's the only time I've ever been.
Hampden Park. I've been past there in a cab, I think, whilst visiting Glasgow, but never seen a game there.
I wanted, it's one of those things on you have these things on your bucket list, listeners. That was one of mine, to go to Hampden Park, one of the great names of the game, of course. So yeah, there we are. So Great Britain 6, rest of Europe 1. And the name got dropped in there of Stanley Matthews. And just wanted to give a big shout out to Jack Gibbons, who was in touch with me via Twitter, who's read the Stanley Matthews biography. I don't know if it's his autobiography. It's a biography. It might be ghostwritten for him. I don't know. But he's got an account of his contact with a very famous Millwall name of Bill Voisey, Neil. Who was training, I think he was training for the England side at the time, coaching or training for the national team at this period. This would be post-war, 1946.
Yeah, I think Bill Voisey had a decent spell as England trainer. I think it was physio, wasn't it? And probably did a bit of coaching as well back then.
Yeah. Bill Voisey, major name, obviously First World War hero in the true sense, decorated. I think it was the military medal he won when he was in the service, and certainly the Belgian Crudder gear. I think he served on the Western Front in Belgium. He was the scorer of our first goal at the Coldblow Lane in Division 3. Major name, major figure in Millwall history, war hero. And then he would take to coaching. I think he coached abroad, but also finished up working for the FA. And this story that Jack has sent to us is a couple of pages from Stanley Matthews. He describes a period where he's trying to get himself fit for a game. He's got a touch of the flu. So he says, at the team hotel, the England Heat team hotel, our trainer Bill Voisey took one look at me and confined me to bed. He's got the flu, Stanley Matthews. I felt weak and drained, and with a minute or so of my head hitting the pillow, I was asleep. I don't know how long I'd slept, maybe 3 or 4 hours, but suddenly I woke to find Bill Voisey at my bedside with what looked like a glass of milk in his hand. Here you go, Stan, take this, says Bill. It's just a drop of my own medicine in a glass of milk. He'll have you back on your feet in no time, said Bill, offering me his homemade remedy, listeners. As Stanley Matthews puts it, he took one large gulp and was nearly on his feet straight away. He said he was never a drinker of alcohol in any form, but all the stuff he'd never drunk was all contained in this one glass of milk that Bill Voisey gave him. He must have put every shot of everything he had in there. Matthew says he managed to drink it down, no sooner had he finished it than he felt his eyes bulging. He gave a shudder and let forth a deep breath and then went back to sleep again. He woke in the small hours to discover his pyjamas soaked in perspiration. He felt that somebody had collapsed on the bed on top of him because Voisey had put 6 or 7 blankets on top of him. And these would have been old school heavy blankets. None of you duvets, big kids out there. Voisey keeping watch over him, basically. Certainly it got him fit for the game next day. Let's put it that way. It wasn't his best ever game of football, but he was fit enough to get through 90 minutes. And Voisey was over the moon at his homemade recipe of rocket fuel, basically, in his glass of milk. They'd got the great Stanley Matthews out of his flu stupor, fit enough to take the field for the England. I think they were playing. It was a 2-0 win over Belgium, watched by the new Prime Minister Clement Attlee. So this would have been 1946. So again, post-war we're talking about. He sounds like a character, Bill Voisey, doesn't he? I mean, the man has seen action and seen the hard edge of life, but wouldn't have been frightened of a few drinks.
Yeah, but we've done a podcast on Bill Voisey, I think, didn't we? One of our very early history podcasts.
Absolutely.
In lockdown. Really fascinating character.
He says, as soon as the final whistle sounded, I felt drained and unwell and had to give the post-match banquet a miss in favour of my hotel bed. This time, thankfully, listeners, without having to down Bill Voisey's rocket fuel remedy. Bill Voisey, there we are. That was too good a story to not to include. Big thank you to Jack Gibbons for sending that to us. And I've got one more, Neil, before we close out. We mentioned in a recent show Dennis Burnett my memory of Dennis Burnett and Harry Cripps going into business together. And I don't think Brian King remembered it when I had the chance to speak to Brian a couple of years ago now. And it was one of those things that haunted my imagination because I couldn't remember if I'd actually read it or whether I was constructing it in my head. But anyway, big shout out to Peter Barrett for forwarding on this page from Mill versus Fulham programme, 23rd of September 1972. Focus on the Lions. Dennis Burnett is the subject of a nice little page actually about Dennis Burnett. But the interesting part for me, the last couple of paragraphs here says, outside of football, Dennis loves a round of golf, but he's also recently gone into partnership with a household name in Mill circles, Harry Cripps. And together they've established a business catering for the do-it-yourself individual. They've set up a business DIY store at 24 the Centre Way, High Road, Ilford, where they supply the requirements for the home decorator. Meanwhile, we hope Dennis will continue to decorate the scene at Millwall. So I thought it was petrol delivery, but it was paraffin delivery, but it wasn't. It was DIY painting and decorating.
The paraffin business was Reg Davis and Joey Broadfoot. But interestingly, I think that Dennis Burnett became a painter and decorator in Brighton.
Did he?
Yeah. Did he? Football career had finished, so this was obviously something to look at. With your future in mind. It's interesting that they actually give the address. Can you imagine a little Nick Hart going along to that shop, autograph book in hand? Hopefully, catch a glimpse of the two great men.
Anyone who knows me well, Neil, will know that the last place on earth you'll find me will be a painting, decorating, DIY store. The last place on earth, and you wouldn't hire me, listeners, to do your decorating either. So, I'll stick to the podcasting. Thank you very much. But I'm just quite glad I wasn't imagining them in business. I must have read this at the time. I'm sure I was at this game, 72. Don't remember. I just had this idea that they were in business together. I must have read this paragraph at that time. So huge thank you to Peter for forwarding that to me, because it puts my impending sense that I was losing the plot to rest. We are. We've covered
Nick Hart losing the plot. That never.
Never. There we are. I think we've reached the end of our agenda, Neil. Unless you've got anything else you wanted to throw into the mix, mate?
No, mate. We've obviously, a couple of people have come up with a couple of ideas, so we will work on them at some point.
We will.
Sorry for being so slow with this, but these things, they do take an awfully long time to put together. It's not a question of we've come up with a show idea for next week, and it's taken it takes 3 or 4 hours just to have a look and just to try and get a grasp of the personalities and trying to find cuttings and newspapers, because it's very all well and good, but you want to put some meat on the bone. That kind.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we've got
it takes some input. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got an
I agree.
excellent one which we'll do early next week, and then hopefully we will turn our attention to the Fulham game. I think a couple of people have on Twitter have got in contact, Nick, haven't they, with us over the past few weeks, and they're interested in the Fulham Sunday game, so we'll look at doing that.
We're going to look at that one. Yeah, absolutely. Big thank you. Do give us a shout if you've got anything that items, curiosities, or old bits of memorabilia that you want to send us a photo of. I know Neil and I love to see that stuff, and we can, it certainly gives you a spark to try and find some details and gives you something to work from. So do get in touch with us. DM, direct message me on Twitter, or if you want to email, it's AchtungMillwallachtungmillwall@gmail.com. You'll get in touch with us. Or the same for Neil. You've got the messages open. So anything you want to bring to our attention is great. And a big thank you to the chaps for bringing both those stories to the show, because it does give us a little bit of feedback, and it's just great to hear from people.
Yeah, but if you DM me on Twitter, just actually tag me in on something and say check your DMs, because there's a spam folder on there, and I always forget to look in the spam folder. So if you can do that, well, absolutely anything. If you want information on a player, you want you've got a piece of memorabilia you want some information on, or absolutely any
stories.
Yeah,
1,001 stories at the den now.
Yeah, a story. Absolutely anything that we can turn into a little aside when we do our main our main history hit. But it's always good to have a game or one or two other things to talk about, just so we can flesh it out for an hour and not waffle on like we are now, trying to get somewhere near 50 minutes.
There we go. We've got about 50 minutes. I think we've probably done enough for 1 week, listeners. Huge thank you, Neil, for joining me on the show, mate. It's always good to hear from you.
Yeah, and you, Nick, and it's always great to talk about history, isn't it? Especially on
Absolutely. A big thank you to the listeners as well. We just before Neil and I started, I transferred over our latest donation to the Lions Food Hub. All of our advertising money goes to the Lions Food Hub. It's a great cause, and we'll continue to do so. So I just want to say thank you to you listeners, because if you don't listen to it, we don't generate the money, and the Food Hub suffers. So big thank you to everyone that tunes into these shows. I think we've done enough for the weekend. Let's keep our fingers crossed, everyone, for Huddersfield tomorrow, so we can go into an international break with some cushion in the playoff zone. So anyway, we'll be back next week, I think. Neil, we'll do another history show next Friday. So until then, from Neil and myself, it's Arrivederci Millwall, and bye for now.
Achtung, Millwall.